This is the Depth Mystic Community Podcast, episode 44. With us, as always, is Jungian Depth Mystic Zach Tollen. Hello, hello. So, what's going on this week? Well, I guess we're transitioning into summer, and it's kind of a slow week. I'm hunkering down, trying to figure out what's going on with my video game. But this mood did provoke at least something like a topic. Oh yeah? And what's that? I thought about predestination, or determinism, fate. I was thinking about how attitudes toward free will profoundly affect human psychology. If you believe we have free will, you act in a certain way. And if you don't believe we have free will, then you act in a different way, typically. Like, if you told me one person believes in free will and one person doesn't, and in every other way they're the same, I would not expect them to act the same way. It makes that much of a difference. Okay. It sounds like a philosophical topic. Is this a depth mystical topic, or is it just philosophy in general that we're talking about? I think we are going to go with a little bit of philosophy this week, since the free will question is just as much philosophical as it is psychological or mystical. And yet it's the topic I wanted to talk about. Okay, so what kind of mood made you think about this? Well, I guess it's a mood of plunging into the nitty-gritty of reality and recognizing reality as a fixed thing, which requires specific ways of dealing with it. One of the advantages of having an overwhelming mystical experience that takes up all your energy is that in many ways you can avoid plunging into the nitty-gritty of specific things. But I guess when I'm doing computer programming, I feel more like an engineer than a mystic. But it's not just that. I think everybody has an opinion, and not just a rational opinion, but like an unconscious, irrational feeling about the question of free will. And I also had some philosophical points to make about it. And I don't know if we call them depth mystic or not, but I think they're good points. Okay, well, carry on then. So, part of my philosophy, I frequently call it neo-Taoism, or just Taoism, maybe, because I've developed a very strong sense of yin and yang. These two, like, archetypal components of, you could say, the universe, or maybe of the psyche. But this feeling of bondage or predestination, like that you can't escape circumstance, that no action that you could take can change certain fundamentals about either your life or the human condition in general. This feeling is yin. Yin is like the darker element, but it's also the feminine, but it's also the way things are. It's about reality. Yin is reality, whereas yang is possibility. So if somebody is all doom and gloom, that means that they're sucked into their yin and they have no access to their yang. Now, there could be material causes for this. Like, actual reality does oppress people. But there are also intellectual or philosophical causes. For example, the materialist believes that everything is just a bunch of atoms and particles smashing up against each other and interacting. And since every interaction of every particle has a causal nature to it, the sum total of all those particles is just one big sort of billiard ball table with cajillions of billiard balls just smashing up and hitting each other. and they will see no free will in there. And so then when they look at the human brain and all of the many neurons that make up the human brain, they will, through philosophical, intellectual reasons, have arrived at the conclusion that it's all yin. It's just reality, and there's no yang. There's no ability to assert your preference on the world. There's no ability to assess what you want. Even what you think is your yang is really just a bunch of particles smashing around in your brain. Now, of course, a Taoist like myself thinks that the actual situation is a constant interplay between yin and yang. But it is funny, this feeling, this mood, it's just as much of an emotion to feel like you have no freedom, no choice, you're a slave, as it is an intellectual thought. And that emotion comes from looking at all of the different things in the world and realizing how you can't really assert your will on most of them, and how each of them collides. For example, if you are in a nation that is going to war, they will make you go to war. And then you feel like that about everything, like nothing about your life was really a choice. And obviously, it's important to acknowledge the yin in the world. It's important to acknowledge the actual things in reality, the giant forces which press up against each other and exclude any possibility of you having an effect. And even our country, I think, that's the big dilemma right now. Because America is defined by freedom, which is to say, it's defined by yang. It's defined by the idea that any person, no matter where they come from, can choose their own life. They can make decisions that affect how their life turns out. We fought a great civil war to end slavery, testing whether all men are created equal. And almost everybody agrees slavery is bad, and yet there are still people who don't believe in free will. They might think the Civil War to end slavery was a good idea, but there's still no free will. We're still all slaves anyway. And then the argument might go something like, what if the condition is that you are subject to the free will of someone else? Someone is the master, and you're the slave, or any one of a number of lesser categories of the same type. They're the boss, you're the employee. And so basically, throughout all of history, since the dawn of agriculture, I think, there have been class-based societies where some people in that society have the yang, the aristocrats, the rulers. They have choices. Or at least that's how it appears. Whereas the peasants aren't allowed to leave. They're not allowed to go make their own fortune somewhere. There is no America for most of history. So I'm also thinking about what kind of rulers are suitable to a philosophy which believes all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. What kind of rulers should such a society have? Or is it all just a pipe dream? Have we never had free will to begin with? Was everybody always just one big slave? Was the universe itself nothing but a giant slave to the forces which make it happen? That obviously devalues America as an idea. It devalues the idea that every person should be allowed to make choices, to control their own life. If you don't believe anybody's making choices anyway. But what kind of leadership should a country based on the idea that people should be free to make their own life have? Because traditionally, in most societies, the ruling class, in order to preserve the amount of yang that is available to anybody, they keep it to themselves. They're the only ones who have any choices at all. And they're scared of giving away any power. Okay, so it seems like this episode is just you, Jungian depth Mystic Zach Tollen, have some thoughts. Most psychologists don't get too political. But if you're going to talk about government today, I mean, I guess we can include that under the topic depth mystic. The problem with yang in the political sense is that it goes up against everyone else's yang. If you have a political idea, somebody else has a different political idea. And since the power to assert those ideas comes from control over large numbers of people, then fighting for who gets to assert their idea is an essential part of politics. There's lots of butting of heads. And so I'm covering this topic that I've been thinking about for a while. If people are slaves, then they are not making any choices. And so they can't be in conflict with anyone else who's making choices. But when you get to the position where you can make choices, then there's multiple factors which limit your yang. There's a yin even to political yang. Like, there are rival nations, and if you want to maintain your place among those nations, you would have to go to war. And I guess what I've been noticing is that among the elite, the issue is frequently which one of the elite will get to assert his yang, will get to assert his will over the people, who will become powerful. And the basic desire in this realm is that one should become the leader. One should become the one who gets to assert his will. Because one believes it's better to be powerful than to be a slave. But then you lose track of the ideas. What are your ideas? Is it just you that you want to be powerful, or is it some ruling principle, some ruling set of ideas? Obviously, the slaves, the peasants, the lower classes, they can't be excited by which particular prince is in charge if that prince isn't ruled by something other than his own ambition to be the one in charge. But I think on a worldwide scale, what's been happening is that the elite have been kind of fighting it out with each other for domination and pretty much leaving the peasantry behind. The elite have sort of decided that the most important thing for each elite to focus on is to make sure that that elite is on the top of the hill when the battle ends. And this consumes the elites. This struggle takes up so much of the energy of the elites that it seems like they've lost their sense of right and wrong, generally speaking. Because if you did have all the power, then the most important thing would be that you would be a good leader. That you would have the right ideas and the right ability to apply those ideas to the situation to make the world a better place. But the American idea is that all men are created equal. All people. And therefore, a good elite ruler in America would be the person who's most effective at creating the conditions in which anyone can become an elite. In fact, they have to do the exact opposite of what most ruling classes have done throughout history. And that might be why they're failing to do it. They seem to now be caught up in all of the same basic forces that ruling classes throughout history have been caught up in. But what we're losing is the ideas. Like the philosophies, the philosopher king, the potential of a philosopher king. The American philosopher king is the one who understands the value of freedom so well that he acts to disempower the elite from hoarding their power. He sees the value of being in charge as ensuring that no one gets too powerful. We have a system of checks and balances, which appears broken right now. But the idea is that principle of the leader should be acting to make sure nobody can be the leader. And that requires like powerful institutions and spreading out the power. But if a ruling class has found its way into the halls of power that has a sort of scarcity mindset, they have a fear-based mindset, they have the mindset that all elites have had throughout history, which is once you're in a position of that amount of power, the most important thing is to fear anyone else having that power. Well, then you've defeated the nation, which is based on the opposite principle, which is that if any one person has too much power, that makes it so that individuals can't make choices. Everyone's a slave. People don't have the right to make choices which affect the outcome of their life. The whole American idea is that people should be free to create themselves. But we obviously need a ruling class that also believes that. Or that ruling class will simply act to absorb all the money and all the power, thus turning everyone into de facto slaves. And I would go so far as to say it goes beyond America. The entire world needs a ruling class that does that. Like America as a country alone, I don't think is likely to sustain those types of principles in a world in which those principles are not also expanding. Because this is like an archetypal principle. This is a philosophical principle about, this is my yang. This is my opinion about the way things ought to be. King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. This idea originates in many ways in England and is associated with England. And the idea is the Round Table has no head. There is no seat on the Round Table that is officially the highest place. Everyone sitting at the Round Table is equal. And so you have a ruling class, all of whom think of themselves as equals. And maybe you have a temporary president or administrator who has the power, but the idea is not for them to just get more and more powerful until the Round Table becomes a joke and the Republic falls. You know, the idea of a republic is the same as the Round Table. It's like even if you have leaders, none of them is thought to be better than anyone else. And we need a worldwide ruling class that actually believes this. That actually wants to set up a spiritual type of round table psychologically. Because if you do it in practice like the United Nations or something, it tends to get screwy. But the people need to believe that this is the best type of world. The people in power, their yang, their beliefs about how things ought to be as opposed to just how things are, their belief about how things ought to be that a world full of no faction that is too powerful is the best kind of world. There could be many nations sitting at a round table, and none of them has any desire to see the other ones become so powerful that it becomes a master-slave relationship. So you have two possibilities. A world that is ruled by a round table philosophy, or an Egyptian pharaoh type of philosophy. Pyramids. There's one guy at the top, and then there's the people with no freedom at the bottom. So you get a pyramid or a round table. And what's strange is that our global elites don't seem aware of this principle. They don't seem generally aware of the fact that the round table world is preferable to a pyramid. Okay, I think this was a little philosophical rant or diatribe. What do we call what you just did? And I do think maybe it's a little bit along the lines of what we do here, which is we talk about archetypes. And you were able to bring in several really powerful archetypes. With the Arthurian legend, I mean, that's about as depth mystical as you can get. But most people don't tie it to politics. Maybe it's because their yang which is to say their idea of how things ought to be isn't sophisticated enough for them to have political opinions at all. But you seem to be like a depth mystic with a few political opinions. Your yang stretches into the realm of politics. Yes, and the American ethic is that I, as a nobody, have the right to speak my opinions on this matter. Now, obviously, people with power are scared of people with opinions about power. But the idea behind America is that the top and the bottom are the same. That there's no one at the top who isn't, in essence, the same thing as the person on the bottom. Most of history, these two groups were split asunder. There were masters and there were slaves. There was ruling class and there were peasants. The best kind of world is the one where the most people are both ruling class and peasant, where the most people have the ability to go as high or as low as they are capable of going. Because it's sometimes nice to think of human beings as having originally come from the animal kingdom in a pre-civilization environment where each human being was more or less free to do as he pleased. Now, obviously, the clan was the primary mechanism of survival. And so many of our biological inclinations are to join such organisms. But there were shamans and magic people who maintained the basic ethic of the individual as free to benefit himself according to his own wits. And that's what I want to get back. And that's what America is about. Jungian depth mystic Zach Tollen, ladies and gentlemen. And that's going to do it for episode 44. If you want to leave a comment, we have a few forums. And we'll see you next week.